how's summer been so far since last time we saw each other down at the city council chambers? Pretty good? Good experiences? Getting an opportunity to get a little bit of hands-on, but really the opportunity to see what goes on behind the whole function of city government. And that's really the focus. I mean, it's not to be able to solve all the problems in the world, but to understand how the government operates. It operates a public sector very different than the private sector, and it's a good chance, if you do, to get a chance to do both, because you really get this understanding. And a lot of people are very critical of it, but we're not like a business. I mean, we can't just go and spend money without going through contracts, without going through processes, because it's public money. It needs to go through a system that's fair. And we don't have the opportunity to make decisions based on what the best profit is. I mean, we are a public entity, which means our profit is not a single bottom line. Forget about Adam Smith, forget about 1820 or whatever he wrote about it. It's not about how many widgets you make and how much the widgets cost and how much profit you can make from making the widgets, and everything else, including the people that are making the widgets, are externalities. The people are part of our equation. We have a triple bottom line. We have to make sure that what we do every day is effective, efficient, and equitable. If it's there for one, it's there for all. And at the same time, we have to take into account not just what that profit line is, what that bottom line that comes down to the dollars and cents is, but how does it affect people, and how does it affect the planet? And we have to make sure that we do it in a way that's sustainable, to last, and at the same time enhances and not hurt the people that we represent. So what I want to do is I want to go through a little bit of Pittsburgh history, give you sort of that mindset, you know, as you're at the midway point or getting to the midway point in this internship, and start to think about where Pittsburgh was, where we are, and then where we can get to. Because where we can get to is as a model of a 21st century city. But where we came from is a remarkable journey. So Corey, hit it.
Machines, inventions, power, black out the past. Forget the quiet cities. Bring in the steam and steel, the iron men, the giants. Open the throttle, all aboard, the promised land. Pillars of smoke by day, pillars of fire by night, pillars of progress. Machines to make machines, production to expand production. There's wood and wheat and kitchen sinks and calico, all ready-made in tons and carload lots.
So this is Pittsburgh.
10,000 millions,
This is Pittsburgh that my grandfather came to.
Better and better.
This is 1939. You're looking down from Oakland down to where the tech center is now. That used to be called the LTV plant, J&L before that. My other grandfather worked there. There are no trees on the hills. All the trees were dead. That's daytime. And now just imagine, this is 1939. In the 1940s, Pittsburgh produces more steel than Germany and Japan combined. So this just gets worse.
Don't make us any happier to know there's millions like us living here on top of it. Prisons where a guy sent up for crime can get a better place to live in than we can give our children. Smoke makes prosperity, they tell you here. Smoke makes prosperity, no matter if you choke on it. We got to face life in these shacks and alleys. We got to let our children take their chances here with rickets, typhoid, TB, or worse. They draw a blank, the kids. They have no business here, this no man's land. This slag heap wasn't meant for them. There's poison in the air we breathe. There's poison in the river. The fog and smoke below rise up and choke us. Don't tell us that this is the best that you can do in building cities. Who built this place? What put us here? And how do we get out again? We're asking. Just asking. We might as well stay in the mills and call that home. They're just as fit to live in. We mine the coal, load the furnace, roll the steel, drive the rivets. We lock the bolt on the assembly line. Lucky if we have the chance to keep the job from day to day, from month to month.
So that's Pittsburgh, right? That's our past. We talk about it, and we talk about it with pride. I mean, it's part of our DNA. It's what built this city. It's built in the folks that worked in the mills, the folks that worked in the mines. It was built on heavy industry. And we put all our eggs into that basket for quite some time. So imagine you're the mayor, you're David Lawrence, the war has just ended, and that's the city that you have. And you're meeting with corporate leaders, and they're saying this just can't continue. We can't have an air quality that is dangerous and a water that's poisonous. We can't have this type of a city and expect it to be somewhere where people would want to stay. So let's go through what they did. So it was called the Renaissance, and it started back in the 1940s, and it basically was this idea. Look at downtown, look at the Point. The Point was a manufacturing center. It had steel mills in it. Downtown Pittsburgh had mills. The bridges and every part that looked was all based off of industry. The Mon Wharf is where ships came and the business was done. And the entire city was built, the transportation networks, on getting product to market. Carnegie used the rivers and used the rails, and everything about it was not about how to get people to around, but how to get that product to market. So Lawrence set out, and again, some of the different views of what downtown Pittsburgh looked like, and just imagine, this is in the 40s. This isn't like 100 years ago. He partnered with a couple fellows. One of the guys' names was Andrew Mellon, or Richard King Mellon, I'm sorry. R.K. Mellon was obviously a businessman. He had a little bank down the street, and he was a Republican. And they put together a partnership between a Democratic mayor, and you have to also understand the politics of this town. Up until the 1930s, Pittsburgh was a Republican stronghold. This is where the first Republican convention was, and it was really after the New Deal and FDR coming in that the politics shifted, and Lawrence became the first political boss of the new Democratic era. But he partnered with a Republican businessman named R.K. Mellon, and what they did is they basically set out not just to run the government better, but to restructure everything in it to build out a new city. They created the Allegheny Conference on Community Development. And you guys probably heard of the Allegheny Conference. It's all the CEOs of the major corporations. And a lot of times they talk about how we need lower business taxes and other things. Back in the day, the Allegheny Conference was created. It was created for two major things. To get our water situation under control so the city didn't continue to flood, and get our air quality to a point that was acceptable. And the thing about it, it really started out as an environmental organization, even though it was a corporate organization. They created the URA. There was no redevelopment authority in the country at the time, but they knew that if they were going to do this massive rebuild, they couldn't use the capital budget of the city. There just wasn't enough money. They couldn't write all these bonds and put it on the taxpayers of the city. They basically had to create a new government that had the ability to write its own bonds, that had the ability to raise its own revenue, and to do it. And then they created the parking authority, one of the first parking authorities in this country's history. So they basically created a whole new structure. And this is what they were trying to get away from. This is daylight. This is during the middle of the afternoon in downtown Pittsburgh. You used to have to bring 2 shirts to work if you wore a white shirt, because by the middle of the day your shirt would be gray from the soot that was in downtown. The street lights never turned off downtown. They started with ambitious projects to retake the Point. That's where David Lawrence was born as a kid and where he grew up. And they redeveloped it into a park. Again, these are cutting-edge ideas. People weren't tearing down industrial sites and creating parks in the 1940s and the 1950s. And they went to build a downtown area that moved the focus from heavy industry to corporate, to headquarters. And by the 1970s, Pittsburgh had become the 3rd largest corporate center in America. New York, Chicago, Pittsburgh. They also had another mission, and it was to what they said was urban redevelopment. And what they used was the wrecking ball and the bulldozer. And they took it into neighborhoods in the North Side, in the Hill District, in East Liberty. And they did massive redevelopment by displacement, moving out people and buildings in order to build out what their model was of urban redevelopment. Now, this was something that was going on around the country at that time, too. And there's battles between the Robert Moses and the Jane Jacobs. And when you study urban planning, you'll study both. Those that were building and bulldozing out neighborhoods to build highways, and those that were preserving and protecting those to create a character of neighborhood. And you can see it in all of those different neighborhoods. Today in Pittsburgh, it's still there, the remnants of David Lawrence's redevelopment initiatives. And so much of the work that we spend today is reconnecting that fabric of community in the Hill District, in East Liberty, in the North Side, and starting to move away from the idea that by bulldozer and demolition ball you can redevelop a neighborhood. Corey? So one of the other things that they did, and the real big focus on transportation at the time, was the automobile. They developed an entire new system of downtown streets that was based solely on the automobile. So since the World War II, we really haven't done anything to change our model of traffic and transportation modeling in downtown, which is why it's unsafe to cross streets, which is why it's very dangerous to ride a bike. It's why with people with needs have a very difficult time getting access to anything downtown, because everything was designed around the automobile. And when you design something one way and you try to use it for another purpose, it becomes very difficult. So what we're focusing in now is a redesign of the entire downtown into the areas that extend from it, and then into the areas of the greatest congestion, which is Oakland. And how do we look at creating what we call a complete streets model? Designing the streets for all uses, multi-use. They also invested heavily in bridges, in tunnels. And what did you see happen? The city of 700,000 became a city of 400,000 because we built driveways for people to leave the city and get out of it very quickly. Again, what you design, there's a product that comes out of that. There's something that when you design the bridges and the tunnels and the highway structure, then you should expect that people will use them to move further out. And we lost not only the population of the city of Pittsburgh and the hollowing out of neighborhoods, we lost our tax base. This is what Pittsburgh looked like, 1950. This is where everybody lived. This is where, in today, where everybody lives. Here's the most important part. In 1950, there were 2.4 million people in the greater, this is our metropolitan area. It's about 8 counties. 2.4 million people living there. Today, there are 2.4 million people living there. What we did is we built out all this infrastructure. We built out all these roads. We built out all these utility lines and street lights. We built out all these sewer lines. And when people from Western Pennsylvania say, why do my taxes keep going up? Well, we have the same number of people, but we've got over quadruple the amount of infrastructure to pay for. Back in the day, when they were starting this plan, when they were building those roads and building those highways and putting all of our transportation dollars into the automobile, there was a limited area that we had to take care of. Today we have much more. The ideas of Carnegie, the idea that the economy of yesterday was based upon how do you get product to market, is gone. Today's economy is how do you get people to workplace. So when we start thinking about transportation, you start looking at other cities. Look at how they're not only designing, but they're now building multimodal transportation. Our next step into our great challenge will not be to build the Monfayette Highway. That's an idea that comes from back here. Our idea will be how do we create a countywide light rail system to be able to get people from all parts of this county into the areas of employment. These are the companies of today, and you might as well add Uber up there now, since they're investing about $100 million now and maybe even 10 times that in the future. These companies are looking for talent, and they can locate anywhere. Why they want to be in Pittsburgh is because of a quality of life that we can give people that they can't get elsewhere, and an affordability to be able to do it. Westinghouse, one of the greatest inventors, sort of lost as many patents as Edison, but what he built was not the air brake. What he built was innovation. He and the folks at his time were basically creating a whole new industry by changing the way things were done. Andrew Carnegie, it was the Bessemer process that created Pittsburgh. It wasn't the steel, it was how we created the steel. Today, those same things are happening right up in Oakland. The mills never left. They just moved up the hill, and they're called UPMC, Carnegie Mellon, University of Pittsburgh. And we have to capitalize on that because that's our infrastructure about building that economy further than what we even back they had in their day. This is a little view of what East Liberty used to look like. You ever see that building up in East Liberty? It's now the apartments. That was done by a famous architect out of Chicago named Burnham. There were two of them. Now that one was torn down, and it is a PNC bank that's been torn down. The beautiful architecture of East Liberty. East Liberty was the third busiest business center in Pennsylvania at one point. It was Philadelphia, downtown Pittsburgh, and East Liberty. And that's what we did to it. That was how we decided that urban renewal would happen. Just went in there and tore it all out. We have to learn from that. We have to make sure and be patient, protect neighborhoods, and use revitalization and the ability to preserve as components of neighborhood revitalization and economic development. This is what we're doing now with East Liberty. We've started back in 1996 with a community plan, and we took 2 years to listen, to basically go through what's called a SWOT analysis. And a SWOT analysis is a way urban planners decide how things get done. What are the strengths of this area? Meaning, what are the things that are here we don't want to lose? What are its weaknesses? What's here that we do want to lose? What are the opportunities? What's not here that we want to see come in? And what are the threats? What's not here that we don't want to see? And the community put together that plan, and you're seeing it now being built out parcel by parcel. The community plan that I spoke about was redone again in 2009, and we're doing it again now, and we're getting down to the point building by building to be able to preserve the parts of the 19th century that are still part of East Liberty, and also to preserve the people who were a part during the bad times, so there's an opportunity for them to be there in the good times. And those are the people. Those were the folks that worked the mills, that built Pittsburgh, and in the process not only built America, but built the middle class. And that's my buddy Justin Strong, who opened the Shadow Lounge in East Liberty with 2 credit cards when nobody else would invest $1 into the community. Biggest challenge of our day is going to be how we're going to address this issue. How do we keep raw sewage from running in our rivers? Going back all the way to Davy Lawrence's time when they talked about the importance of clean air and clean water. When Andrew Moore was running Google. When Google came to Pittsburgh and said, Mr. Moore, we want to take you to California. And he said, no, I'm fine, I want to stay here. And they moved Google to Pittsburgh to be here with him and his team. I met with him and asked him, what can we do to help you? And he didn't ask for any tax cuts. He didn't ask for free parking. He said 2 things: clean your air and clean your water. He said, it's the biggest detriment I have of attracting world talent to Pittsburgh. He goes, the 20-somethings, I can't get them. They're going to the coasts. They want to be either in the East Coast or the West Coast. But the 30-somethings, they're the ones that I can get and I can bring them here. But when they go and they look and they research Pittsburgh, they still see the air quality and the water quality. We're not only going to address cleaning the water, but we're going to do it in a way that is green, meaning that you can develop areas where not one drop of water goes into a sewer system when it rains, even during heavy rains. The entire Bakery Square has been developed this way. Other areas that we invest public money will be invested that way. But at the same time, instead of just building a huge septic tank under the river, we're going to build in neighborhoods, parks and greenways and areas where water can be held. And you know what we're going to do? In communities like Homewood that don't have a park, they're going to have a park. And it's going to increase property values in that community and want to see people move back in. And we're going to use our land bank in order to be able to do it. And at the end of the day, we're going to have a less costly system because we're not going to have to spend as much on massive infrastructure. We're going to spend it on reinvestment in community. This is the idea. These are projects that are already being undertaken by neighbors in communities around Pittsburgh without any government involvement, that they're doing it on their own. To them and to a lot of people, it looks like they're beautifying their neighborhood. But what they're doing is even more than that. They're helping to save tens of thousands of taxpayers' dollars that we can translate into tens of millions. From blight to beauty. You can turn this into this with proper planning and the proper investment to make it happen. You don't have to go in and do what we did in the past with a demolition ball. We need to reprioritize. Do we develop into something that is a combination between housing and entrepreneurship, or do we demolish it down and put in a drugstore with a big asphalt parking lot around? For years, people thought it was the same thing. It was economic development, it was growth, because they saw nothing happening in neighborhoods. Today, we have to prioritize how those dollars become spent. And this is where we start to look at it. These are the areas from the childhood home of August Wilson to the areas throughout this city where we have the opportunity to implement this. It's all a question of how do you want to spend the money? Do you want to build a bigger tube under the rivers? Do you want to pay international contractors to dig it so that it's so far down it can never be exposed, and then 100 years from now replace it? Or do you want to redevelop neighborhoods and hold that water in those neighborhoods by putting the same dollars, the same money, into a green system? And the final part of it, it's not only about the environment, it's about the people. This is the unemployment rate within the city. The darker it is, the higher the unemployment rate. And if I were to overlay that with a comparison of the African American community in the city, it would be comparable. Meaning we don't have a black middle class in this town, and we barely have any wealth. What we have are large tracts of population that are caught in a cycle of poverty. It's a cycle, it's cyclical. And there are concrete examples, Corey, that we can look at to be able to, Corey? Sorry. To be able to see where that happens. So we can see it in areas of affordable housing. We can see it in areas of access to health care, both physical and mental health care. And we can see it, there's a third area, and I'm sorry, I'm just skipping on it right now. Healthcare. Oh, education. I mean, right now you can look at high school graduation rates and zip codes, and it's a direct correlation. And we need to be able to do much more in all three of those areas to create a level playing field. A great example of, again, having worked with this guy for a number of years and his work being done outside of city government, the Trade Institute of Pittsburgh goes and recruits people who have been through the judicial system and 100% who've come out of jail. And they teach them the trades that have been lost: bricklaying, ironworking, and they have a 100% employment record from it. And if you talk to Steve Shelton, who's this guy, who's a pretty gruff guy, about who his best students are, he'll tell you they're drug dealers, because they're the most entrepreneurial. And for so many of them, and these are folks that are in their 30s, it's the first paycheck they ever got. Don't have to explain this, but you know, people like my grandfather, who came here with a second grade education, worked in a mill his entire life, was able to own his own home, join the middle class, send his youngest son, my uncle, to college. There was a middle class. The jobs that we created were jobs that people had the opportunity to break those cycles of poverty. We don't have that anymore. And there is a direct correlation. As union membership decreases, the middle class decreases as well. So when we have the opportunity to invest, and let's say it's the casino and they want to build a hotel, but they're refusing to let the workers in the casino unionize, and they're not going to let the workers in the hotel unionize, and they're coming to us and saying, give us government money. How is that a good investment? When I know that the money that I'm going to give them is going to make them richer, but the people that work inside that building are going to have to rely on public assistance for food, for transportation, for housing, and I'm going to have to pay another check to subsidize the workers that they're not willing to pay the extra money to help to break the cycles. They're not a partner. A bank would not give a developer money if it were going to lose money for their shareholders. Why would a city give a developer, private developer, money when it's only going to cost them more on the back end because they're not paying the workers enough money? So it again comes to the prioritization of how we spend the money. Not all development is good, is what I'm trying to say. Said it before, I'll say it again. The mills never left. They're these new giant employment. UPMC employs more than any steel company did during the heyday. But at the same time, they've got to be able to make sure that the low-skilled workers have an opportunity to break those cycles, and we have to partner with them to make sure that that happens. You don't have to do it through lawsuits and threats. You do it through a partnership that is built around the understanding that our entire economy is based upon not just the great things that we're looking at and seeing in top 10 reports, but the 30% of the people that live in the city of Pittsburgh that need a helping hand to pull them out of the cycle of poverty. 30% of the people that I represent live in poverty. That's unacceptable. The best tool, early childhood education. And I can show you by neighborhood the amount of kids that are dropping out. The graduation rate by race, keep going. The amount of money that we're spending actually decreasing under the Corbett administration in public education. But the most important graph is when children with pre-K are given the opportunity before the age of 5 to have some sort of education, every single statistic proves the success that they have at age 5, go back, at age 14, graduating from high school, owning their own home at 27, earning over $20,000 at age 40, every single indicator. So why aren't we investing at that? That's where the real focus needs to be. From the city of steel to the city of learning. If we have the Pittsburgh Promise to give kids the opportunity to go to college, we've got to have a program that works with it to make them promise ready, to give them the opportunity to use that scholarship. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is by creating a pre-K program. And here's the thing about it. I got 12,000 kids in this city under the age of 5. I know that half of them have some access to pre-K, the other half don't. That's 6,000 people. That's a workable number. And if we get an all hands on deck, the same way that David Lawrence and R.K. Mellon did it between government and the corporate community, and we pull in the nonprofits and the others, and we can create that model of pre-K and actually prenatal to pre-K, we become a model city for this world. That's the model of the 21st century. That's the infrastructure that you build out. And we must rise. So we have to create the capacity around all this. It's not just having a public works department and a police department anymore. Local government now becomes not only the urban lab, but the implementation of all of these things that we're talking about. And the thing about it, it's never going to come from Washington. And to be honest, it never really did. All the great movements that have happened in this country's history have come from the grassroots level up. It's not going to come from Harrisburg. But cities around the world are networking. And there's two models of city government right now in any city in the world. There's the model that is the old vestige of the political machine, where you do the things for a handful of people, it's backroom deals, it's just getting through the system, not really looking at all the different parts about what makes a city and a region thrive, but basically just carrying out the duty of it. And then there's a whole nother part and a whole nother network of people, mayors from around the world, around the country, that work together, and they're basically competing against each other. And that's where you guys jump in. This is now a competition to see how Pittsburgh can become that model. It's on open government and transparency. It's on showing and being able to create models where we are able to break down where disparity exists and to provide some assistance to make it happen. It's on utilizing technology in ways that have never been used before, and it's somehow tying all that together. So what we did, Corey, we started to create a new department, Innovation and Performance. We created a new Bureau of Neighborhood Empowerment. We're focusing in on housing and entrepreneurship. We're focusing in on education and working with the nonprofits and our faith-based community. And on the whole other end, we have Innovation and Performance that's working on sustainability, technology, systems, and inclusion. And inclusion is where all of this starts to come together. The moment that these two departments, then their missions, become locked is the moment that we've created that type of city government that becomes a model for the 21st century. So, that's it. That's the challenge. That's a little bit of the history. But here, when I started with a video that was sort of down and depressing about this city, I'd like to end with a video that sort of shows it in a different way. P4 was a global summit that we created this past year. Andre Hines, whose family has been involved in Pittsburgh for nearly 200 years, hosted it together with me. And we brought in people from around the world to talk about the new model of government that is based on people, planet, place, and performance, and how all 4 of those metrics need to be measured when we do decision making in city government. And this was a video that was pulled together by the folks at P4 that sort of highlights the importance of where we are today, and the folks talking are talking because they're the future of Pittsburgh.
So when the steel mills closed down, a lot of people didn't have that many jobs. So people just started leaving, and the number of people living in Pittsburgh went down. But I think it's slowly starting to creep back up. And so since that's happening, I think more people are starting to come back. Oh, people are coming back to Pittsburgh, so that means I should come back too. You know, I think that's what other people are saying.
There's a lot of things that we can do in order to improve our air quality. And I think that if we're going to settle for the air quality as it is today, then we need to dream bigger.
Because there's really some good people out here that want to help change the world, change Pittsburgh, change Hollywood, but we're not being noticed.
For the future of our kids, I just want my kids to live in a healthy environment and airspace. I feel like global warming is going to negatively impact that.
Personally, I believe that global warming is almost penance that we're paying for our poor management of the globe and our mistreatment of the planet.
My concept of sustainability is being able to just do more than just being able to sustain your lifestyles and being able to go beyond that.
Well, the first step for dealing with any sort of these problems is to acknowledge that you actually have a problem. So in the past, we've had problems with the ozone layer, for example. We actually dealt with that. We changed legislation and we accomplished something.
I just hope that my kids stay here, and I think we plan on it.
Too often I see around me people that are oblivious or say, you know, it's a scam. I think it's important that we educate the children now and the leaders of the future so that we can make the best decisions moving forward.
We've been talking a lot about renewable energy, so in the future I would like Pittsburgh to run sustainably on mostly renewable energy.
I want to know that when I walk out the door that I'm safe.
I think the air quality in Pittsburgh is a concern. We try to live healthy lives, we try to eat well, we try to exercise, but I recognize that by living here, my kids are at a greater risk for heart disease and cancer simply because of the air that they breathe.
I like living in Pittsburgh because you get to go in all these buildings around the world, and it's actually like really fun. If they were like taller, it would be awesome.
When Pittsburgh gets behind something, it's a beautiful thing to watch.
I guess a priority of mine would be smart planning, looking to the future.
I think that education's really important, so I want to make sure kids have lots of education.
I'll be like a grown-up soon, and it's going to be really fun.
I want to be an architect or a hardware engineer. So when you're I think that there's not a lot of hardware engineers, African-American hardware engineers in the USA. And I just want to make that little tiny percentage maybe a tiny bit bigger.
I'd like to see us all act with pride. I think if we do that, whether we're leaders, pastors, teachers, students, parents, if we ask ourselves each day, am I acting in a way that can make my children proud, my constituents proud, myself proud, then we will make progress.
That's where we're at, guys. So in 70 years, it's been quite a journey. First 35 was redesigning and basically re-establishing a city. The next 35 saw the collapse and the rebuild. And today we're at the cusp of what will be the next Pittsburgh. And we don't even know what that will be. It's a blank slate. But we have the potential to become the model of a 21st century city for all cities around the world. So enjoy. I'll see you again in a few weeks. Just wanted to let you know the importance of the work that you're doing here. Thank you.